Well, this video sadly doesn't have any booze for me to drink because it's going to be really difficult to get through. Oh yeah, haircut. But basically, this is my second video response to Izzy Inkpen, ladies and gentlemen, the new blue-haired girl on the block who has exploded since she did a slam poetry that totally wasn't a plagiarism, even though it was a response to Savannah Brown. But hey, you know, all the power to her. I tip my tea to her because I don't mind people getting big. I don't mind. I mean, poetry. We need more poetry, even if it's crap slam poetry. More people doing poetry is good for the world, even if what she's saying in it isn't necessarily the smartest. But whatever. So I look through her channel because that's what I do sometimes when people pique my interest, and she piqued my interest quite a lot, I must say. So I discovered this little doohickey, and it's about the importance of the word feminism. So strap in, people, it's going to be a big one.
My close friend Emma recently made a video talking about how she used to believe in the ideologies of feminism, but she only recently came to identify with the term. It's not that uncommon to hear people say that they would prefer to call themselves egalitarian than associate with the man-hating, feminazi connotations of feminism.
There's your first problem. The problem is that it's not just the man-hating feminazis that are man-hating feminazis in feminism. Even the mainstream of feminism, who aren't, you know, TERFs or SWERFs or radfems, although they're all radfems, but it's not just limited to them. In the mainstream, you will see people in mainstream media outlets such as the Washington Post, the Guardian, especially the Guardian, Huffington Post. So you pick BuzzFeed, for example, will espouse man-hating ideals. Do you want an example? The hashtag kill all men, questions for whoever from BuzzFeed, any article from Jessica Valenti, Julie Bindel in The Guardian, you are guaranteed to find some sexism and genuine misandry from these sources. And these are mainstream opinions, and it's only a minority of people who are genuinely not man-hating feminists.
Hannah Witten
Triggered.
recently made a video on feminism where she said that the issue of what people call themselves isn't one that she likes to focus on in a kind of pick your battles mentality.
Yes, that's all well and good, but she's also of that mainstream feminist opinion. Although she's not a man-hater, she certainly has been apathetic towards men's issues because, to quote her, men already have all the rights.
Over recent months, I have been leaning to the same mentality myself, but I do think that feminism is still an integral part of the movement.
Well, nobody's saying abandon your word. The word is what you guys use to describe yourselves. That's fine. I would never ask you guys to abandon that label. I would never tell you to call yourselves egalitarians if you don't want to be called egalitarians. I'm not Sargon here, who will do that to Dr. Andy McCann because he's an MRA. I would not do that.
As an English literature student,
God help you when you're in the job market.
I may be biased because I have an interest in the power and effect of words, but there is no denying that words are important. They are how we communicate ideas, argue our case, and therefore incite change.
Well, I can't argue with that in terms of debate, but then again you have to then also do an action, and that takes more than words. But other than that, I have no complaints here. She's kind of right.
The definition of feminism is the advocacy of equality of the sexes and the establishment of the political, social and economic rights of the female sex.
You see, the dictionary definition had to come up. Interesting that you say the female sex. Well, let's just get into this, shall we? Let's actually do my take on the dictionary definition thing, shall we? So here's the Merriam-Webster definition of feminism, and here are the two definitions. The belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. Organised activity in support of women's rights and interests. Now, which one of those do you guys think that Izzy was talking about when she paraphrased the meaning of the word feminism? Did she mean the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities? Because that's egalitarianism. That is the literal definition of egalitarianism. Let's see what Merriam-Webster has to say about egalitarianism. A belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political and economic affairs. A social philosophy advocating the removal of inequalities among people. That is pretty much exactly the same as first definition of feminism, but worded differently. Now, she used the Oxford Dictionary, and when I saw the Oxford Dictionary definition, this is what I came up with. Now, bear in mind, this is the website and not the book, so bear with me. The advocacy of women's rights on the ground of equality of the sexes. But where have we ever seen feminists actually want equality of the sexes? Every time we see a mainstream feminist and the radfem talk about this, they only ever talk about women's rights, and if we fix women's rights, men's rights and all the other social ills that affect the genders will magically disappear. And remember, again, this is the advocacy of women's rights, not men's rights, not human rights, just women's rights. This is, by definition, a movement that is only interested in the rights of women. You could say it's a supremacy movement, and I know there's another word that isn't as strong as that, and I can't remember it right now, but I'm sure people in the comments will tell me. This is not a movement that is egalitarian. As you see in Merriam-Webster, it says organised activity in support of women's rights and interests, and that is what we see in the mainstream. This is what we see in the radfems, and that is what Izzy is referring to. Organised activity in support of women's rights and interests.
If, therefore, someone is pro-equalitist, which is the vast majority of people these days, then they are, by definition, a feminist.
Words are one thing in a dictionary, Izzy, but actions are another thing, and sadly, the feminist movement does not act in that first definition that I showed you from Merriam-Webster, nor does it act in the way that Oxford Dictionary says it does. Although, as for the advocacy of women's rights and interests, yes, you're right, it does. Feminism does not say that we need equality for the sexes. I think you'll find that they're only interested in serving women's issues and their interests. I've never seen a mainstream feminist argue for the things that MRAs argue for. In fact, the biggest feminist organisation in America, the National Organisation for Women, are against shared parenthood. And you may think that's American, but let's take a British example. The MP that I once admired greatly, Jeremy Corbyn, lost my support because he is not for gender equality. Firstly, it was to do with the segregation of carriages because of the hysteria around sexual harassment, which happens to both sexes. Then he decided that he was going to blame men for being sexist because they would go to after work drinks, even neglecting to mention the fact that women do the same. And then I found out that he's also against shared parenting, and he's probably against quite a few things. What I want to know is, how come I keep hearing that feminism is supposed to be for equality, and that if I'm an egalitarian or an equalitist, which doesn't exist, how am I therefore by definition a feminist when I clearly am not? It's like saying North Korea is a democracy even though clearly it's a dictatorship. And not just any old dictatorship, it's a Marxist, communist, hereditary dictatorship. It's practically, that's where your argument falls apart, because the movement does not push for equality, only supremacy it seems.
So, why do people reject the word? I think for many it is the presentation of the word, the root femme implying female and therefore a preference for women's rights.
As both our dictionary definitions pointed out, yes, that is what it's for, women's rights.
Whereas most people want to show that they are an advocate for all equal rights.
Because as I've demonstrated, Izzy, feminists are not about the equality of sexes. If they were, we might be seeing a fairer court system. We might be seeing no prison gap. We might even see an acknowledgement that there is no pay gap but an earnings gap. We won't be seeing a lot of the problems that we currently face today. Instead, we also have a rape hysteria where women are being told that they have a 1 in 5 chance of being raped, even though it is less than that. We have a false rape allegation crisis where not only are college courts and university courts doing a due process, but also the courts themselves, the actual law courts. We see this listen and believe mantra being used when it comes to victims of rape. Even if they weren't raped or were raped, we have to automatically believe them because they're women. And male victims suffer from this because, according to the Duluth model, we can't have male victims, just male perpetrators. Or, as in most rape definitions by law in most Western countries, you'll find that a man can be raped but only by another man. So when men are victims, as it has now been amended, it still has to be a male perpetrator. A woman will be believed more than a man, propaganda, and not only will they be automatically believed, but the man can automatically be arrested and put on trial, and his right to due process can basically be ignored. And that is the issue that we're facing today, thanks to feminism, but apparently it's for equal rights, but hey.
But the main crux of the term is the advocacy of the equality of the sexes. The fight for equality with particular adherence to the inconsistencies between different sexes and gender characteristics.
If I'm getting you right, you're saying feminism is trying to end characteristics of the sexes, things that are innate within us biologically? Oh, we're talking about stuff in law and in society. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Since everyone is somewhere on the gender spectrum.
Izzy, there is no gender spectrum, there are only two genders. Yes, you may point to trans people, but trans people are called trans people for a reason. They transition from one to the other. I know you can say, how dare you be so sexist to these 70 other genders that apparently exist? Science disagrees.
This means that everyone is included in this term, especially in recent developments of intersectional feminism.
I've never seen a single intersectional feminist fight for men's rights. I've seen them fight against racism when it's white against black. I've seen them fight against sexism when it's men against women. But I've never seen them fight sexism when it's women against men and blacks against white. And again, the definitions themselves clearly show that it's the rights of women and not the rights of men.
Egalitarian, for context, asserts the equality of mankind.
Asserts the equality of mankind? What does that mean? I know you're still quoting it and I may have jumped in a bit too quickly here, but we're not asserting anything. We are for the rights of mankind. It's not an assertion. We literally believe that all people are born equal.
You could say, therefore, that there is little difference between the terms and it doesn't matter what people call themselves.
Well, there is a difference. Feminism fights for women's rights to be equal to men, which they have overachieved to the point where now we have an imbalance. Egalitarianism, however, says mankind, which means everyone, men and women. And we will fight for their rights with an equal fervour, or with what is required to get these people their rights. There is a key difference there which either you're ignoring or not seeing, because by your own definition of feminism, it is not the same as the one with egalitarianism.
But here's the thing, I'm no Saussure. Words are not in a bubble associated only with their dictionary definitions. They have context and history and connotations. The first written evidence of the word feminism, according to the OED, is 1841 and first included in the dictionary in 1895. If you search the word feminism in the dictionary on Google, you'll be cross-referenced to suffragettes and the women's movement. Historians disagree when feminism can be said to begin, but Hodgson Wright argues that feminist history can be traced as far back as 1550, when women first started to try to undermine the male-orientated Christian doctrine.
Now, I can't say whether or not that's true or not. I think this is during the time of the Reformation. These people would not have been feminists. I think it's a push to say that feminism started in the 1550s. These were probably people who were very religious and just part of the Reformation during a time of religious turmoil and were coming up with their own version of Christianity, I assume.
When I came to do research for this video, I got these books out of the library, but there were hundreds to choose from.
And how many books were there about men's rights? How many books were there about egalitarianism compared to feminist and women's rights books? Not a lot, is there? I think that's quite telling about our society, isn't it, Izzy?
There are feminist perspectives in every area of study and political discourse. The word is entrenched in history, laced with the power of the game-changing women that came before.
But not all of them would have called themselves feminists. Not all of them were part of the feminist movement, because remember, the women's movement is technically a separate entity to feminism. Feminism is an ideology that came out of it after they achieved their goals in the 60s and the early 70s. So a lot of these people that you talk about weren't actually feminists, they were just women's rights activists. And you can be a women's rights activist and not be a feminist.
To deny this word is to deny access to a powerful social movement.
So by that definition then, to deny an MRA or an egalitarian the right to call themselves that, and instead call ourselves feminists or any other word, we'll be denying the power of our movements.
Egalitarian just doesn't compare.
No, it doesn't compare, but not in the way that you think. You think it doesn't compare because it must be inferior because it has a different history. I'm sorry, but the history of feminism, no matter how much it may appropriate from history to call its own, which is spurious and full of pseudo bullshit anyway, that does not have any bearing at all on the word's power, really. It has no bearing on how a person will use the terms. Egalitarianism as a word and as a movement shows far more compassion and far more concern for the rights of everyone than feminism has since its inception. It's called egalitarianism for a reason.
Even if you do strip back to just the word itself, Dale Spender argues the very existence of feminist meanings undermines the existence of a monodimensional reality, i.e. the reality of men being the norm.
What does that even mean? That's just a load of word salad. Men being the norm? Of course men are the norm. We're like 50% of the population. That's just me taking that literally. You know who else are the norm? Women. Women are also the norm. Why? Because they're also 50% of the population. We're a sexually dimorphic species. What does he mean by that? What do you mean by that? What does that mean? How does that help your point? I'm struggling to follow you here now.
Spender's book reveals the male-orientated language that we have, from calling God he to the fact that old woman can be used as an insult to a man.
In the Torah, God is actually gender neutral. It's only in the Christian Bible that God has a gender. But let's just take a look at this. The God of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, especially when we translate it and they're using the word he and all that, that makes men look bad because God is a genocidal, hugely jealous, crazy deity. That reflects badly on men, does it not? That just means that we're genocidal, evil, hugely jealous individuals as a group. And our language is not male influenced. We have feminine words and we have masculine words, like every language. And we also have gender neutral language as well. For example, the word sir can be used for a female superior in the Navy or in the Army, even though she's a woman. It's just a term that they use. Yes sir, I sir, Mr, for example, can also be used for women. We have a lot of overlap, and of course it's not the actual meaning of the word, but that's the context that they use it in for their language. And as for old woman can be used for an insult to men, well, calling a woman a man or an old man can also be an insult. Women don't like being called men don't like being called women, because humans don't like being called something that they're not.
But if you called a woman old man, it just means that there's a misidentification.
I've actually seen old man be used as an insult to men, actually. Oh, you're past it, old man. It's not just a case of misidentification. Women don't like being called men. They don't like being referred to looking like a man. Same as some men don't like being referred to looking like a woman.
In literature, the vast majority of the respected canonical authors are male, from Chaucer to Shakespeare to Wordsworth to Rushdie.
I would like a citation on that. You've just mentioned a load of names of men who are authors. How is that sexist? How does that make our language look bad? You know George Eliot was a woman. You know Charlotte Bronte was a woman. Jeanette Winterson is a woman. The author of Frankenstein was a woman. There have been loads of women who are authors. And there are still loads of women who are authors. Why is it that a lot of the greats tend to be men? Well, if you look at how men and women's brains work, on average, this is not to say that this is every person's brain. There is clearly a difference. Most of the geniuses tend to be men, but also most of the retards tend to be men. While women are more in the middle. They don't have two extremes that are equal to each other. So you won't have an equal amount of retards to equal amount of geniuses. It's just like a kind of a roughly median bent. Clearly, there are genius women out there in literature and in all sorts of life, and they exist. But that's how it seems to work. And that probably explains why a lot of the authors are male.
The language we speak is inherently misogynistic.
How? Because a lot of genius literature writers tend to be male, because we have masculine words and we refer to particular deities and use particular words in a masculine or feminine way. How is that misogynist? That's just how our language works. That's not misogynist. I could easily say it's misandrist.
So to define ourselves as feminist is to define ourselves against this male dominance.
No, you call feminists because you advocate for women's rights and you are the ideology of women's rights. That's why you're feminists. You are female supremacists. You advocate for females. That's what a feminist is.
That said, the word feminism is not without its difficulties. Major victories in the women's rights movement, for example in 1928 when women won the vote in Britain, often see a decline in feminism afterwards. People consider the battle to be won, and in the 1980s the term post-feminism appeared. As I mentioned earlier,
I don't know why there was a loss of support. Maybe the vote was all that some people wanted to fight for and that's all they wanted. Now obviously things changed and women achieved full legal rights, if not more, in the 70s. And in the 80s, people quite rightly assumed that other than in a few places in Europe, like Ireland for example, they thought in Britain and in a lot of other countries the fight was won. You look at the legal thing and you can see that yeah, they're right. People fight for different goals, and at least as far as I know for the 80s it was pretty much done. But that's my opinion. Continue, Izzy.
In recent years, with the rise of internet trolls, a feminist has become synonymous with a man-hating lesbian.
I don't think the rise of internet trolls has anything to do with the fact that feminism is associated with man-hating or man-hating lesbians. Just look at the 1970s. You will see these types of people burning their bras, moaning about men, and you'll see it in the 80s as well, you'll see it in the 90s. You know, in the 90s it did have the internet, it wasn't as big as it was and not everybody had it. That has been synonymous with feminism for the last 40 years.
Some people see a life of feminism as a life of such independence that it will only lead to loneliness.
Hang on, feminism is going to be a life of loneliness? I don't understand. There are loads of feminists who have partners, men and women. Maybe a lot of women who are feminists are lonely. But maybe that has to do with the fact that they're horrible people rather than feminists. I don't know how to answer that because that's something that you can't really quantifiably answer.
Some worry that the anything goes approach to the definition of the word has rendered it practically meaningless.
It certainly makes it hard for you lot to actually get to any idea as to what you lot want to fight for nowadays or what you actually believe in, because you don't have someone who is a figurehead who can say, this is what we believe in, like say what Catholicism has and what Islam used to have in a caliph. You don't have that. You're pretty much a leaderless organisation of sort. So Bell Hooks kind of has a point there, but I don't think that makes it meaningless. That just makes it meaningful to the individual, does it not?
Words do not behave according to their dictionary definitions, and therefore these connotations cannot be ignored.
So am I right in saying that the actions of the movement speaks louder than the words in the dictionary definition of the movement? Is that what you're saying? So that means egalitarianism, because it acts in the way that its definition says it acts, is therefore the better movement. Because I don't see feminism acting in any way like an egalitarian equality movement.
To combat these issues, there have been efforts from the third wave feminists to rebrand feminism, making it more sexy and stylish for the straight, feminine consumer.
Why would they want to do that? Why? I thought that feminism was in tune with the lesbians and the straight people simultaneously and equally, because, you know, we have things like political lesbianism and a lot of the big names are lesbian or bi or straight, whatever. Why would they want to do that? That doesn't make any sense. Is it because women are becoming less and less feminist and more egalitarian and they're choosing not to associate or identify as feminist? But increasingly in this century and in this decade, we now see that most women in this country, 92% aren't feminists, while 80% are, and it's about 18% in America. Maybe that's why they're trying to rebrand it, to stay relevant.
This in itself has divided feminists, with some seeing it as empowering and others seeing it as subverting the movement and reducing its revolutionary power.
Considering you are now in the mainstream and a lot of your people are now the politicians in power, the people who run the universities and stuff like that, don't you think it's hard trying to be in power and losing your revolutionary edge? It must hurt, mustn't it?
In my opinion, however we go about presenting the movement of feminism, we must not reject the word itself. The word has great diversity and can mean a variety of things to different people, but the fact is, feminism does not mean man-hating.
But then the actions of the movement suggest otherwise. At the very least, it shows that they have an apathy towards male issues and men in general, or to the very extremes, they hate men and actively try to hinder their legal rights and their human rights. So what is it then?
Feminism wants equality, and that is universal.
Well, if they want equality, how come Corbyn and the National Organisation for Women are against shared parenthood? How come these people constantly attack MRAs and egalitarians for fighting for men's rights? If they're for equality, why aren't they working with us? Why are they against us?
Claim to be an anti-feminist because you are someone who advocates equality is a contradiction in terms.
It's not a contradiction in terms because feminism does not mean equality. I am an egalitarian anti-feminist. I believe that both men and women should be equal. I advocate for that. I see feminism as the antithesis to that because they do not advocate for that. The majority are the man-haters. They refuse men the right to their own bodily integrity and their reproductive rights and their familial court rights and law in general. They do nothing but hamper our efforts to solve these issues.
So I call myself a feminist, to honour the women who went before me and for empowerment, and because I want to see gender recognised as a spectrum so that anyone of any sex or of any gender can act and live as they please.
But not for equality of the sexes. Because you didn't say that. You didn't say that men deserve equal rights. You talked some tumbleweed bullshit at the end about a gender spectrum. Look, people can live the way they see fit. They already have that right. But what you mentioned there has nothing to do with equality. Nothing at all.
People may say I'm a feminist because I'm selfish. I am, after all, a cis woman.
Did you just say you're selfish because you're a cis woman? What? What? I'm speechless. What?
It is true that personal frustration as a result of being a woman is an element of why I define myself as such, but it is not my main reason.
That's not a good reason to call yourself that. I call myself an egalitarian because I advocate for both genders' rights. I don't do it because I'm insecure about things about myself.
I am a feminist for my 3 female friends who were raped before the age of 20.
So you're a feminist for this then? Good. What's this got to do with equality of the sexes? These women are far more likely to see justice than a man would ever get if he tried to bring his rapist, male or female, to justice.
I'm a feminist for the women of the UK, who are represented by a government where only 29% of the MPs are women.
Yeah, because apparently if you're a male MP you can't represent your female constituents because you're a man. Yet apparently a woman can do the same, yet Jess Phillips, Theresa May, all those people would suggest otherwise.
I'm a feminist for the 15 million girls a year who are forced into marriage before the age of 18.
I'm not hearing anything about men or boys, but it's okay, you're for equality.
I'm a feminist for the trans women who continue to not get the respect they deserve.
I can't respect someone because of what they are on a sheet of paper. I am a trans person, I am a man, I am a woman. I can't respect someone because of their demographic. I have to respect someone because of their actions. Are they a nice person? Are they a respectful person themselves? Have they done good things? Have they done bad things? I can't respect someone because they're trans or because they're male, because they're female.
I'm a feminist for the 4,861 men who committed suicide in the UK last year.
Oh good, you mentioned it, but it seems more like an afterthought and something just to put in there to prove that you're not a man-hater, rather than you actually are a feminist because of this.
And I am a feminist for me.
Well, apparently you are selfish because you're a cis woman, but I don't think that's true. I think, you know, you're just as feminist for you. That's fine, whatever. Whatever floats your boat, Izzy, whatever.
I'm a feminist because my dad told me at 12 years old that I should not show my intelligence if I wanted to get a boyfriend.
Anecdotal evidence, and we cannot prove that this really happened. For all I know, this could be bullshit.
I'm a feminist because I can't walk down the street without a man looking at me like I am a piece of steak on his plate.
Oh, come on, just because a guy checked you out doesn't mean he sees you as food, which you mean is a sex object and he wants to have sex with you. So what if he thinks that girl looks nice, I'd like to have sex with her? Women do the same thing to me, only I'm not hyper aware about it and I don't care about it. That's an insecurity of yours. There's nothing wrong with being desired. Being desired is a good thing. And just because a guy looks at you also doesn't mean that he's desiring you. Maybe he's thinking, I better get out of this girl's way because I might bump into her, or human in the way, veer left or right. He might not be thinking about you in terms of sex. Or maybe he's thinking, do I know that girl? No, I don't. You don't know what men think, but you're a woman, you're a feminist, and you think you do.
I am a feminist because if I am a virgin, I'm frigid, and if I have sex, I'm a whore.
No. We've gone through with this before, okay? Do I have to educate you on this again? You're not frigid if you're a virgin. Who the hell says that? And if you have sex, you're not a whore. A whore is a prostitute who has sex for money. You mean a slut. A slut is someone who is promiscuous, but only promiscuous in the sense that they do it indiscriminately and without any care for the consequences. You can be a perfectly healthy human being who's promiscuous and have safe sex and nobody would judge you for it because you're a responsible adult. This is not hard to understand. This is what the actual culture thinks, but no, you still think we're stuck in the bloody 1910s. This is the 2010s. current decade, people.
I'm a feminist because our institutional sexism still exists across the world.
Can you provide me examples? Oh wait, Danny Course comes in like, you didn't show me any of yours! Oh my god, no sources!
Feminism is right.
Is it? Then how come we live in a society that we do currently where men have the short end of the stick? And that our rights have been taken away, we have safe spaces, freedom of speech is currently heavily threatened by these people. Are you sure you got it right?
Feminism is strong, and I am proud to be associated with it.
Right, good for you. Good for you, Izzy. You're proud to be a feminist. I'm proud to be an egalitarian. Whatever, people, that's the end of the video. Like and share it. If you love my channel, please subscribe, and also donate to my Patreon if you want me to strive to improve this channel and to keep the lights on. So until next time, I'll see you later.